Whew, that was a long one. All right. I'm going to take the opportunity to stop time so I can cover what we're doing next. We're going to quickly get a number from this. That number is going to be 6.5 a minute, 1.2k a minute. We're going to explain what this does. It generates copper cables from the wiki's ideal module suggestion and recycles them all into plates, and then we measure the plates. We measure no cables because all cables are consumed in production. We do this because we have to have an idea of value of 20 copper plates. We know what 3 can do now. Since our material of interest, which is this low-density structure, is also cast from fluids, we also are getting an idea of what 20 fluids means. All right, we're done. On to steel. Why? Other than the fact that I don't want to edit 30 minutes of video footage, and I promised 10 to 20 minute episodes. Yes, I had to demonstrate that I could build things. And one of the things that I had to demonstrate building was a number. I ended up closing my save in this game, and I had to rebuild the demo. This is what's on my Coffee page now, but I left it running for 10 hours, and when I put this number in, I get something like 0.07 and some decimals, which is very close to 1 divided by 14, and to the number that Konages references in his working material, which is something like 13.23. I'm a happy man. I'm within striking distance of those numbers if I put them into my terminals. I've done there what I needed to do. With this, I've shown what I need to show. Why is this hard? Well, from this building, I'm doing a technique of quality in depth because I'm manufacturing a plate at quality, and I am creating a material, and then I'm getting my material back. From cradle to the grave, I'm doing copper plates. If I were doing this for copper cable, I would have to have a normal station like this, and then an uncommon station, and then a rare station, just like I have on my remanufacturing step. That's why this isn't a cradle-to-grave build. These are usually more complicated, and they're not going to be considered anywhere else. This simply gave me a convenient number of 3.0 a second going into these machines. By not using productivity, I have a more compact build, because productivity is going to generate more items. This is the assumption, at least. If I actually go in and check that assumption, then the main thing that I'm cutting out here is fluid. That gets cut in half compared to this one. I would have to double up buildings. in order to make it perform at an accelerated rate. Because that's about, what, 5 cables now. Or sorry, 5 plates. This is feeding in 1.4, and I have to catch the quarter coming back off of this process, even though it's modified by quality. That's why I need all 4 of these. Okay. I can explain why the choices. Why the process? Why just quit? Well, I can choose to explain my choices or not. Then I can do quality and depth or not, whether I explain myself or not. Then I could do ores or fluids by having a box of ores somewhere leading to furnaces. I'm saving that for steel. I want to keep this simple. I can make one more choice. And in doing so, I'm going to run back into this line. This isn't usually how tree diagrams work, by the way. They like to draw them as V's, but the consequences are going to be the same. This is, however, a bit realistic in how it happens with quality and in considering all of the possibilities and doing your own research. Because I've done my own research, but the choices I have in presentation alone are showing that I have, if I limit myself to 2 choices, a kind of exponential growth in choices when it comes to presenting this topic. Because I could use quality and depth using this technique, or I could go to Gleba, where there's a biolab which takes 2 steps, and quality can be applied to each step. And then I can forge the raw materials for a massive bonus. I'd love to do videos about quality and depth. Let me know in the comments if you want to see something like that later. Right now we're doing LDS because as I consider LDS, I can attack these issues in pieces. Because these issues of inconsistency occur throughout the system. What I miss is an exact ratio for copper wires, which suggests how important selecting production steps can be when the game is balanced. And in this case, if I take 6.5 a minute and consider what that is as copper cables before I go running off to steel, the first thing I'll do is I say make 2 copper cables, and then I'm going to grab my best building and show that I can load it up with these productivity modules to get a 1.75% bonus. This is going at 3.0 per second. I could possibly apply a scaling argument there. What I can't do in the modeling, and it shows up in my production statistics, I can't add in these 10. They're all going to be consumed by this recycler. The process may be made more efficient if you consider copper cables by filtering all of them out here, but I'm changing my model. If I were using a matrix, I would be changing the inputs on that matrix. I already have by putting in this building. On that account alone, I might actually be using one matrix for every tier that I filter out, right? I could argue that. And then I'd have to account for all of those matrices at the end. I am always going to have to put energy into this system. Somebody may be able to do that in 1 to 2 hours of work instead of leaving their video game running for 5 hours, possibly while they're sleeping, which is what I did. They'll be in a tricky situation because matrix multiplication is not normal multiplication. It's quite a bit more difficult, right? There's specific optimizations for that in computers. That explains why Konage and the wiki's numbers vary slightly. When it's communicated, there's also the choice of how you round. So this puts us in a really, really tricky situation. We have to rely on even a third guy, and we'll say their name is Daniel Monteferro and put them in our links on our introduction tutorial for all of our resources and say thank you. Because we do need a third guy, right? But when we consider all of these things, even if I neglect speed, 2 times 1.75 plus 1, and then we have to communicate well and not in broken ways, right? So let me look at what I have written down. 6.5 times 2 times 2.75. All right, let's go with that. Without applying scaling due to speed, we're at 35.75. Even though we're moving slower with this method, we're going faster. Because we're taking more care to handle our raw materials. This is realized in another way in the game. If you make components, you can only make them with 4 modules, so you can't apply productivity bonuses like this. It's a case of garbage in, garbage out, because you're breaking down a machine, inspecting it for good parts, and then reassembling it at that point, based off of the output of a production line which is trying to make this at a phenomenally low rate. And you can attack the issue from cradle to grave there too, but it ends up being ever more difficult. The more energy we put into getting a good rate, the harder it becomes and the more energy it demands from us. That's inconsistent. In order to navigate these choices, we have to choose not to go backwards and look at ghosts like copper cable in the past, or how accurate a number could be when it comes from a different part of the world. We also have to not look at tantalizing possibilities for presentation and take things a bit at a time. And then make a choice to go forward. At this point, I've shown everything that I need to show from this build. Mistakes and all, what this does in order to get it, where we make an intermediate part, and then break it down into a component. But we're still going after those components because we can use those to produce a part more efficiently at the end of the day. And the sort of energy investments that this system is going to... Well, demand is the wrong word. It's more of an invitation. Not everybody likes this. And one of the manifestations of that energy output and the inconsistencies in this system is when you hear people talking about this, they will complain that all of the assembly lines end up looking the same because we have the same block of 5 parts that's being remanufactured. I want you to consider how strange that is in a game where in the 3 years that I've played it, I've always started out with a furnace stack that's some variation of this, right? That's what we do. We build and power regular units in this game. We don't do this stuff like over here. We start out with this. We take the fuel and the materials off of this line, and we put them on this side. There's 2 other solutions that I know of to this. But you're going to tend to gravitate towards a single one, depending on what you want from the system. When I started my filming, I did one of these like so, that ends up creating a more compact build. It is a bit useful on space platforms. It creates a repeating unit, right? But somehow making the same assembly line is samey. This game is infamous for being addictive, and we've been doing the same assembly lines for years. What's going on? Right? We're seeing the ghosts of our past. Because we're considering all of the possibilities. It's funny, but it's really not funny. And I have to present what I see without being too strong. But this is what I see. And this is what the data shows me. I can't not have an opinion about what I see in front of my face. I'm at 20 minutes now. This is the target time. It's time to move on. We're going to look at steel next. We're going to see what haste versus waste looks like without beacons.